Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Paul Sims speaking from a very wet and windy London today. You may know me already. I'm the chairman at Eyeforpharma, and I'd like to welcome you to today's session, which is called Power to the Patient, Impactful Digital Stakeholder Engagement. Now, of course, anything with the words patient, digital, and engagement in it these days is going to be topical and is going to attract a lot of interest. And in fact, we have close to 1,000 people signed up for our session today. And I know that a large number of you are also going to be coming to our Barcelona event in 3 weeks' time, where we're going to be talking a lot more about this. But, of course, there's already a lot of conversation on these topics. And so what I'm really going to try and do today is to focus. I want to really focus on three things. The first is to generate insights to help empower HCP-patient communication. So we're actually, as well as the patient, going to be talking about empowering physicians, as well as patients, physicians to work with patients. The second thing I'd like to talk about is about the tools. We need to find ways to aid dialogue and deliver a seamless user experience. And we're going to be talking a little bit about tools, technology, and ways in which we can make sure that happens. And then finally, the third thing I want to focus on is about collaborations that we require in our industry to further develop those patient relations that we are looking for. So those are my three, hopefully relatively specific aims. And to help me get there today, you will see that there are some attractive smiling faces staring at you from your screen, and I'd like to introduce them to you. So the first on your top left is Lars. Lars is the CEO of Ignicio. And in fact, I should point out that Lars and his colleague Mads have supported us in putting today's webinar together. They've been a terrific support, not just in terms of the content today, but also ensuring that we have a great attendance. So thank you to both of them. And Lars himself, we interviewed Lars not so long ago, and we heard that he has a very strong belief that life sciences in general is ready to embrace technology, far more so than this ever has been, but still has a long way to go before it really achieves that. And I suppose Lars' experience working in software consulting around Europe prior to his Ignicio days is going some way to demonstrating that we do still have some way to go. So I know that he and his company Ignicio feel they've got a duty to be very visionary when it comes to pharma. So I'm looking forward to hearing more from Lars later. So underneath Lars, you'll see Davidek. Davidek is from Teva. Now, Davidek is actually a professional basketball player and coach. Probably not what you're expecting me to say. I don't believe he does too much of that anymore, but that was where he started his career, I believe. Nowadays, he's known for solving practical problems that add to the bottom line at Teva, for being very innovative, and has created and managed a team of functional experts in EHR and health IT space to support brands. So as well as being obviously head of field experience, he's clearly au fait with technology as well. So really pleased that you could be here. Now, Lisa. Lisa, you may have met if you've been at Eyeforpharma events recently, as she's been a star contributor together with her colleague Anne Beal. And in case you don't know, Lisa has been with Pfizer and Lilly in the past, but for the last 18 months or so, she's been responsible for establishing the Patientcentricity function within Sanofi and making sure that that function indeed has a strong influence on all aspects of the business. So really delighted that Lisa could be here and bring a very strong patient angle to our conversation, obviously absolutely necessary. And last but certainly not least is John. John has recently changed his job title to Vice President of Digital for AstraZeneca, where he's been for 16 years and actually has a long history in the innovation space, both US and global. He actually led the Nexium brand away from sales reps to multi-channel promotion alone. And has established some great digital partnerships in that time. So really delighted you could be with us, John, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today. So the first thing I'm going to do is to ask you, audience, to be as conversational as you possibly can during this session. We have close to an hour with these guys, and really the only way to make sure that you get the answers you want is to make sure you ask them. Ask your questions. So use the right-hand side of your screen and make sure that you send us, you can send us a quick hello now so I know you're still awake, and then hopefully a few more questions as we go through the day. I'm going to pass over firstly to Lars, who's going to show us a couple of presentation slides that I believe he has prepared. So, Lars, over to you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And I'm really delighted to be in this webinar, of course, with the audience and also with the other panelists. Now, as you see in my first slide, I believe that the changes forced upon pharma requires us to think of our business models in a new way. And so, as we together explore the topic of patient empowerment and digital engagement, I would like to touch upon a couple of the trends that pharma companies face. And they will certainly influence what we can achieve in the short run and also in the long run. And we can debate whether these are sort of perfect trends or indeed maybe perfect storms. But it is certainly a good moment to discuss how we can engage the market in a different way. One thing's for sure, if left unnoticed, then pharma's ability to be in the driver's seat of their own industry may change for the worse, depending on what type of stakeholders will gain more power in this ecosystem. So if we first look at the society, pressures from society on pharma has generally changed. Of course, it's primarily the ambition to drive down prices, but it's really the return on investment that they're looking to increase. So they want a better health, so to speak, for less dollars. That also brings us, as a pharma industry, some opportunities because by sort of taking focus away from pricing, by launching other support initiatives, complementary tools, and so on, we can actually increase the health outcome and focus will maybe go slightly away from the price itself to the benefit of all the stakeholders, not least the patient, of course. Now, the pharma industry has debated patient and customer centricity for many years now, and I guess depending on the company, the results have been varying, to say the least. One reason probably because responsibilities taken by pharma have been a little bit unclear. The expectations from the other stakeholders as to what pharma should do, can do, are allowed to do. But the industry is on the move with initiatives such as sales to service, with the MSLs gaining more power and a multitude of other new roles. And also, of course, the industry is turning more and more towards digital solutions that are evolving really fast. So as pharma's reply to this trend has gone back and forth between direct in-customer touch, such as portals, and attempts to empower the HCPs. Perhaps it's not the dilemma between, shall we do one or the other? Maybe it's more the paradox of having to do both, the pull and the push, and allowing the most trusted advisor, the HCP, to take part in this push and increase their value add as well. So if we look at the product that the pharma industry offers, I mentioned the price pressures. But there's also this constant struggle to not have a lack of differentiation, to improve differentiation possibilities. Actually, in recent diabetes studies, the perceived product differentiation by the patient was in the single digits. So they can't tell one from the other in many cases. So again, we should turn this into our opportunity to apply more strongly, in marketing speak, the other piece than the product, those that are around promotions and places, services, communications and availability and channels and so on. And ultimately, we might see that we evolve our business model into more of a drug as a service model. Finally, but very importantly, the patients or the customers continue the growth and empowerment through organization in programs and in groups and through education, but first and foremost, of course, through the availability of a myriad of opinions, mostly on the net. A lot of this data is unfiltered and unorganized. It's sort of an unmade puzzle, and the risk of misdiagnosis is there. It can lead to, of course, less than ideal outcomes, and therefore ultimately a mistrust in the drug providers and in the HCPs. So that's actually in very stark contrast to what the patients are expecting because they want to feel empowered and engaged. But they too, struggle with all the many stakeholders like we do. So perhaps, there's an opportunity in this as well in helping the HCPs and the patients through this complexity, through communication and collaboration and digital tools, like are the topics for today's conversation, and therefore achieve a better patient experience. But as these trends are likely to turn into reality over time, let's have a look at what are the most important stakeholders see. Now, as an industry, pharma has of course gone to the HCPs for many years, primarily with product messages and predominantly face-to-face. But the HCPs are transforming a lot faster than we think. First and foremost, they're starting to be as connected as the patients, wanting to learn to keep up to date and to get educated in new ways. And that's why we need to help them enhance this sort of patient healthcare dialogue. Actually, 43% of them are saying that that's been a huge challenge so far in terms of improving treatment outcome. But that the time is now is certain, because in a few years from now, more than 50% of all the HCPs will be millennials. They've grown up with internet, computers, and online tools. So if we blink for a few more moments, the doctors are maybe on par or ahead of us in terms of digitalization. The question is just, of course, from where do these digital initiatives that help the doctors come? The most important stakeholder here has to be the patient, right? And they've got huge digital expectations as well. We might call them the on-demand patient. If we take the example of the 20 to 30-year-olds that are maybe not patients yet, but bound to be at some point, they already expect to have data and tools to help them manage their health, just like they do for everything else in their lives. And they expect to use this to help doctors deliver more personal care. So actually 40% of patients are willing to pay for additional services if there's a proof that this can help their health. And they are okay, the majority are okay that some of this support, some of these tools come from pharma themselves. That's why pharma in the right-hand side of the slide, they're symbolized by a computer, i.e. someone who has the possibility to go really digital with all of the stakeholders around there. And with many stakeholders in the room, like it is with all team dynamics, it can either be exactly that, dynamics or dynamite. And we know that historically we've seen both, not least in the American election campaign, that dynamite can also be what comes out of our many different stakeholders, such as government. And finally, just to boil it down, the important question for us here in the audience today is how do we improve communication and collaboration amongst these stakeholders to ultimately deliver a better patient experience and to achieve a better treatment outcome? So let's share some of those insights that you have all provided, as well as those that we discuss today. So with that, I'd like to hand over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Lars. Thank you. Some excellent scene-setting work there, and indeed, I don't think anyone's going to deny that the customer landscape has been moving on and will continue to move on more quickly than we have been able to. I thought that perhaps there's a little practice for the audience, and perhaps it segues from what you've just said. Let's ask the audience a question. If you look at your screen right now, you should see this pop up. What do you believe is the greatest barrier to a pharma company achieving true customer centricity? So Lars has already spoken about how physicians are becoming digital natives, etc. But what's actually stopping us? And we've all heard these issues before, but I'd just like to see if I force you to choose only one, which one will you go for? So regulatory, technology, customers are unaware or unwilling, no proof of sufficient ROI. That could mean also that you can't get buy-in within your organization. And then finally, poor internal organization. It's our fault. We have no clear responsibilities within our own organization. So I can see about half of you have voted so far. I'm just going to hold it open for another 3 or 4 seconds. So 4, 3, 2, One. Okay, so we've got about 3/4 of you voting there, and let's have a look at those results. As you can see, we are top and bottom here. So regulatory, a lot of people blaming, perhaps totally fairly, the regulatory hurdles that we face. 3%, I didn't expect this to be a popular one, so we don't have the means to engage is not an excuse. So hopefully, Lars, that verifies what you were saying, that we certainly have the opportunity to do what we want to do when it comes to technology, and at least customers. We can't. 80% of us say that the customers basically aren't ready yet. 70% perhaps facing an internal challenge, and another 35% facing even more internal challenges with no clear responsibility or buy-in at their firms. So I don't know if that surprises you in any way. Lars, just very quickly, and then I shall open it up to the rest of the panel. Is that what you would have expected to see?
Yes, I think it's pretty much what I would expect to see. I'm positively surprised by number two that from an industry as such that we don't believe any longer that technology is sort of a barrier to success. So I think that's great. And just commenting on the last one there, the poor internal organization, I think there's some hope there to be had in the customer conversations that we had. Most of them are on the move there as well, from boardrooms to senior management and all throughout the organizations in their messaging, but also in their organizational changes. Right down to asking what people's titles are. You know, the word patient crops up, MSLs are on the increase, and so on. So I think there's some light at the end of the tunnel there in terms of the organization as well.
Thank you. Let me open it up to the rest of the panel. Would anybody like to comment firstly on anything that Lars said, or also obviously on these results, and indeed what you feel that we might be able to do to actually move this conversation on? So shall I start with John, since you're there?
Sure. I think I am aligned with the poll. I think I would play more on fears than regulatory hurdles, and I think in my experience, there's a lot of ingrained promotional / marketing parts of our organization that are reluctant to give up the old way of doing things. And while the people that we call patients are out in the world, accessing Amazon and clicking and collecting their materials, we have relied on a more traditional approach with a number of intermediaries. And I think the expectations, and this is where I think Lars is spot on, is that the people are out there in society and they are experiencing things and wanting a better experience from us. And I think it's incumbent on us to continue to push on the fears and on the internal organizational capabilities in order to make sure that we're able to better deliver for these patients.
Okay, so that's a useful point of view. Lisa, you are coming at this from a patient centricity angle, I'm assuming. So this is a customer centricity question, but still, I'm sure that many of the same barriers exist. Could you want to comment on that? Lisa, we can't hear you. I'm just checking that we haven't accidentally... I think you may have muted yourself. Okay, Lisa, we can't hear you at the moment. So we're going to have to go to Davidek.
Yes, so kind of to Lars and Paul's point of view, really, it's I think we even need to take a step back and really ask ourselves, really, what is...
Yeah, then you can you.
Sorry, Lisa, we can hear you now, but Davidek's just answering. I'll come back to you in just a second.
Sorry, Lisa. So really, we're asking ourselves, what is customer centricity, right? We know it's not customer focus because, us in pharma, we have plenty of good practice of doing that in the industry today. We also know it's not targeting our customers with weekly rep calls, right? Repeating the same message, for example, right? It demonstrates high focus on the customer, but it's truly not really customer-centric. What we need to do, and this is nothing new, but pharma, we need to put ourselves in our customer's shoes, right? We need to ask ourselves as a customer, right? Do I find any added value in this offering or interaction? Would this relationship be aligned to what I'm trying to achieve as a customer, right? We really need to look at what are their goals, what are they trying to achieve? And this not only applies to the customers, but it applies to the patients, prescribers, and the payers as well. But really, how do you bring this to action is really how do you create a product or service that really follows these guidelines. And again, I think the value I can potentially add on this call today is not really talk too theoretical, but talk about some of the experiences I've had in the past of succeeding and failing. But one of our successes we've seen in the past recently is with one initiative we created, which is called the Beacon Initiative. And really, the Beacon brand is really Teva Oncology's way to being a partner with the healthcare community by somewhat providing additional skills and tools to healthcare providers to really look at different approaches within holistic care. And we deliver this through multiple channels, whether it be digital, but also face-to-face congresses. And this is nothing around the brand. It's strictly how do we help our providers have that conversations with their patients, because we found out this is one of the tools that was potentially lacking. And we found the best way really to make better days for our patients was through the HCPs in this instance, right? Originally, we wanted to target the patient, but we found out that, again, the healthcare provider was the best channel for this. And we were able to achieve patient centricity right off the bat, because what we found is patient centricity was the why, and the healthcare provider was really the how we did it. Because we found out when we engaged the healthcare providers, the patients were able to better have an outcome at the end of that, if that kind of makes sense. So we ran down a couple angles there, but the way we used the Beacon Initiative was really to focus on the healthcare provider to provide that patient centricity to the actual patient.
Okay, thank you. Davidek, I'd be very interested to hear, it sounds like, and we are going to be asking everybody for some practical examples, so thank you for starting that off. But in general, would you say that you have encountered a positive and an open-minded mindset from the physicians that you've tried to work with when it comes to working with these tools and obviously improving the patient centricity?
Yeah, we actually see once we went away from the brand message and really around to here's tools to help you support your practice, again, it comes back to my original comment of, all right, what is our customer's goals? What are they trying to achieve? And we found out that for this specific area in oncology, really what they were trying to achieve was really, really holistic care. And they needed the tools and resources around that. And that's something that we were able to provide and really create that engagement, which at the end couples up with the patient centricity.
Okay. I'm going to invite the audience in shortly because we're getting some great Q&A, so thank you to everybody coming in. But I believe that Lisa's now online. Can you hear me, Lisa?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Fantastic. You're a little bit quiet, so you might need to speak up, but we can hear you. So would be really interested in your comments on this as well.
Yes, so I was saying that I think the bottom two, insufficient proof of ROI and no clear responsibility, are kind of tied, because what we see is many of the efforts are split across many organizations, across the marketing, across the medical organizations, and even within marketing, within different silos. So as Vivek was talking about, when you get in some instances, you need to leverage the HCP to help the patient. And so I think that part of the challenge is in internally crossing silos. And so when we've had some of the most successes, medical and marketing have collaborated, for example, in our diabetes programs to develop services that improve patient self-management and outcomes. Like many other diseases, diabetes is a disease that it's largely based on a number of patient behaviors around food, around adherence to medication, and it's a challenge to manage that in your life. So we've developed some programs that help both patients manage their lives as well as support HCPs, including nurses, in helping patients communicate better with their HCPs about their needs and issues. So sometimes it's often simple tools. So we've developed a tool that's basically a conversation flashcard. Yes, it could be digital, and it can be paper in many countries, and it is, but it helps facilitate that conversation and buy-in and collaboration so the patients can solve their problems.
Okay, thank you. By the way, a few people are asking about what they can see on the screen. Our session today is very much discussion-based. That's usually what works best. So Lars has shared us some slides, but the rest of today's session doesn't have specific slides other than the results you can see. So no need to write in and ask about that. But obviously, Lisa, really good answer there. Really nice to see some specific examples from you coming in there, and indeed to show that the HCP and the patient seem to be engaged. And I want to actually just move very quickly on to doing a couple more of the audience polls, if that's okay with everybody. You should see another one arriving on your screen. This is very similar to the question I've just asked Davidek about whether or not you believe that the community, the HCP community in particular, is willing to adopt the digital solutions provided by pharma companies. Now, I realize, of course, a digital solution could be a wide range of things. And this is a very generalist question, but I'm talking about attitude here. I'm talking about the way in which HCPs, you believe, actually respond to the efforts that we're making. So I'll hold that open for another few seconds. I can see most people have already voted. Very willing, willing, not very willing, or very unwilling. Very simple set of results there. So 3 seconds more. 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's have a look at the results. So I would say that's a pretty normal distribution with the majority of the answers in the middle there. Nearly 2/3 of people saying that people are willing and considering some options, so that is a case for optimism. And the two lowest obviously being the extremes. So that is some hope, I think. And then I'd like to immediately ask you another question that's incredibly similar to this one. So just try and bank some of those results in your mind if you can. And now try this question. On what extent do you believe that the patient community is willing to adopt digital solutions provided by pharma? So let's see if there's any difference now in those results. So I'll just hold those open for a few more seconds. I can see everyone's getting on with it straight away. That's great. Got 2/3 of you in. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, slightly more positive, I think, is what we would conclude from this. A good 32% of people saying that very willing, 49% willing, and again, a drop-off at the end there. So the patient community, even more strong, but I think that we've already heard examples, of course, of where working with physicians nonetheless can create a stronger effect. I don't know if, John, coming back to you again, if you have any examples within AstraZeneca of where you've been able to make this work, but really interested in finding out whether particularly digital things that you've done are actually making waves.
Yes, thanks, Paul. I would, so there are a couple of examples, and I'll say a general thing first. I think we've been most successful in this area when we have used a user-centered design process that includes both HCPs and patients. Because I think when you're getting into the heart of a problem that a patient or provider has, then there may be a couple of different aspects, and chasing the right problem with your solution, which often includes a digital aspect, is key. One of our successful areas, and this was more about patient support in the lung cancer community, was a program we call Living With, and that we were seeking to provide a support for patients who are now living more often with lung cancer, and I think the promise of the medicines that are coming will enable even more of that. But by simply co-creating that with patients, we found, I think, a real voice for patients, and that has resonated in the community. And we've reached over 120 million people now with that community, and there's we've got about 120,000 that are more actively engaged, and it's a global rollout. So, and I think the fact that we are engaged with some original people in terms of creating that content and serving it back to the community, it has continued to spin and generate on its own from there. So we have taken that lesson and applied it to other products that we have coming, and I think we'll see the services that will come with our new medicines and oncology and in respiratory. Will have a lot of those same tenets of co-creation with the strength of providers and patients.
So, John, this is never the most politically correct question, but would you say that also there have been strong commercial benefits, and would you be able to justify those internally were you to ask for future investment in similar programs?
So with Living With specifically, I don't know that we have a commercial benefit. There's no branding. There's some AstraZeneca branding, but there's no products that are related. And, it's the risk you take, I think, in this space about the ROI police that were on here a minute ago, I think it's dangerous to try and measure ROI. What you should be measuring is the outcome against which you were seeking. And in this case, it was much more about creating a community that could support one another. And the metrics, therefore, that we've used to measure success have a lot more to do with the engagement level of the community and the way that we've been able to reach the population.
Okay. Lars, I'd like to come back to you. You obviously have experience across working with several companies. But you can hear some nice examples coming through. Have you got any advice or principles that you could perhaps communicate with us about to try and help us, the rest of us, going forward on this?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I very much concur with what John just said in terms of co-creation. I do believe that, if I learned one thing in technology, it was to fail fast. And anything you want to expose to users, to customers, to partners, and so on, find out as quickly as possible if it has any purpose in life, really, for them. If it doesn't, move on to the next idea. And I think Silicon Valley is full of that type of examples. But I think also, just to add to that once you have got good ideas in terms of digital tools that can help both patients and HCP communities to adopt digital solutions, it's quite important actually to hang on to that co-creation thought. So if possible, the engagement between the HCP and the patient should also be kept in the light of co-creation. If they have the possibility to sit down together and discuss certain keywords, for example, associated with their disease, with the patient's disease, then if the HCP can provide documentation that are along those lines, then the patient will come out of there with a higher understanding of what's going on and more commitment to follow the advice that's in there, however broad that advice is. So it could be not just about the drug exactly. And I believe that can they be enabled to share that with their families and friends and so on. I think there's a lot of proof to say that if digital is stretched that far, then treatment outcomes will be improved even further. So I very much agree with John's experience.
Thank you, Lars. Some very useful things. I'm going to go back to Davidek now because I'm really interested in what you feel like you've learned from the initiatives that you've been working on, and whether or not you've got general advice that we should all watch out for as well.
Yeah, so I'll give you a good example of something we did actually globally. So we have a patient solutions team that focuses on one of our major brands on really getting product to patients, keeping them on therapy at also this difficult point in time, right? And it took years to build out this service. And we used hundreds of patients, hundreds of providers to help build out really a best-in-class way to really help them through this part of their life. And, I mean, to this day, we have really great feedback around this program. But I'll give you an example where, all right, we think we have the tried and true process and way of how do we support our patients along their journey for a disease state, and we actually tried to replicate that with a different disease state and a different type of patient demographic. But we followed the same processes as we're doing now, and I will say it was a total failure, right? So what we didn't do, we assumed that, all right, since we reached out to this one base and we figured out we had the practice down, that we can almost replicate it with any disease state or any type of patient. And we found out the hard way that this really wasn't the case, right? These patients wanted to be communicated potentially in different channels. They wanted different types and levels of service versus this other group. So we were able to pivot really quick, obviously, and really, focus on truly what is the patient's need there and how they need to be supported. But I think the example I wanted to take away and the users take away from this one is, You might think you have the solution, but I mean, it changes. And it also changes via time as well, right? The way our program was set up 5 years ago is not how it's set up today. We've had to adapt it, and you're constantly understanding what are your patients' needs. How can you help them along this journey, right? So that's kind of my quick feedback on that one.
And can I just jump in, because Vivek, I think I'm a little bit familiar with some of what you guys have done, and I really think that first service is probably one of, if not the industry best service that's been created, and it's just a powerful lesson that as effective and engaging as that was for patients, the same thing didn't work somewhere else. So it really is about kind of following the insight.
Yeah, it goes right to your point. You really need to get both their perspectives.
Thank you, everyone. Keep the audience questions coming in, and if you are able to share some of your own examples, then I would really appreciate that, as right now we're really looking for practical cases that have created some learning. So do jump in, and do also feel free to express why you chose some of the answers in your poll results, as we want to elaborate, and we will we will bring you into the conversation very soon. And Lisa, a comment from you before I go on to my next question.
Our experience has been that both patients and providers have been willing to adopt digital solutions, but the types of providers matter. So in many instances, if the providers feel that our service is replacing them, so if people feel that, our service might replace the certified diabetes educator in a program like Coach, where we're supporting people with diabetes, or in certain instances, if the diabetologists don't feel like they're going to maintain the connection to the patients, then there's more resistance. But if we co-create and share with the providers our work in our platform, and we also go to the providers who are most receptive and spending a lot of the time educating patients, we've found them to be the most receptive and, frankly, to reinforce the most patient engagement. So nurses in particular, we have a global nurses platform that's digitally engaged, and so there's a lot of components to digital, including communities of providers, and they have been extremely helpful in both helping us co-create solutions with patients, disseminating solutions to patients, educating patients, leveraging tools, or giving us ideas for creating new approaches to help patients manage their diseases, from everything from vaccines to chronic disorders. So we found that in many instances, it's a matter of finding the right provider matching with the right patient population.
Okay, time is marching on. I'd like you guys to look at your screen very quickly now, because as you can hopefully tell from the introduction I gave, I'm very keen on advancing the conversation here. And I was wondering if our audience could help. I've already challenged our panelists on this question, and maybe if our audience, you could write this question down, because we are going to move slides on in just a second. See if you can answer this. I'll happily give a free prize, a prize to the best answer for today. What will a pharma company that embraces customer centricity look like 5 years from now, and what will it be able to do that it can't do currently? So that's an open question, and do feel free to write in a response to that. I'm looking for answers which really show a clear difference night and day between where we are now and the capabilities of tomorrow, if we indeed go down this trajectory that Lars eloquently explained at the beginning of this, and we've seen obviously isolated examples of since. So write that down now, as I'm going to move on to the next slide, which, as you can see, shows a pie chart. This is a pie chart showing the answers of a question that you all as attendees gave as you joined the webinar. In the future, will digital services be a central part of every pharma product and solution? So this is what you answered when you registered. And as you can see, there's a huge strongly agree bias there, and indeed we are really under no doubt that these digital services are here to stay, that's for sure. And if you feel like you disagree, we'd love to hear from you on reasons why. And then there was another question as well that everybody answered as they came in. Oh, the pie chart seems to have grown a bit. Life sciences companies can't be successful in the future without being patient-centric. So here, the strongly agree is actually approaching 3/4 of the bubble, and agree nearly filling up the remaining quarter. So again, incredibly strong response here. I would want to almost play devil's advocate there and ask whether or not indeed patient centricity is absolutely the right thing for every company to be producing, because there's a lot of theory, particularly in academic circles at the moment, that our companies will, for the majority, be patient-centric, but some companies don't need to be and shouldn't necessarily try to be, because being all things to all people is actually not very easy to do. And some companies will need to continue to remain focused on their pipeline and the quality of their medicines as going forward. So very interested to hear whether or not you would support that theory or not. But certainly lots of belief that companies will form new species and to move away from all being the same as time goes forward. I'd like to come back to Lars, if that's okay, and see if you have any comment on these pie charts, and of course whether or not you yourself want to go back to my question about where you think companies will be 5 years from now.
Yeah, certainly. I look at the pie charts, and then the first thing that springs to mind is actually some of those other industries that technology has transformed in recent years, the last 10, 20 years. Most companies who have survived or perhaps even thrived in those industries have been the ones that have increased their value add, the perceived value add by the customer. And if they haven't, they've been pushed backwards in the value chain that they served until they became, commodities, really. There are lots of industries like that, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not smart enough to judge whether the pharma industry is prone to that. But the question is, are we willing to take the risk? So I think the only correct direction is to continue to explore and develop the value add around the product, the core product that a pharma company provides to the customers and the patients. So with that, my own guess, so to speak, at what a company might look like 5 years from now if it embraces customer centricity. Some of the key words there are really drugs as a service. The actual drug is surrounded by services perceived of high value add.
Lars, sorry to interrupt you, Lars, but I had a few people earlier asking you to expand perhaps on the drug as a service idea. So perhaps I thought this could be a good opportunity to do that while you're here and mentioning it again. Could you maybe just give us a couple more sentences there?
Yeah, absolutely. If I take the analogy from software itself, it used to be something that we bought in terms of the licenses and registered as assets and so on. But really, what the customer value add was basically the functionality, the value add that software provided. And in a way, since there's not so much differentiation in drugs, I think we need to, as a pharma industry, look at what are the different types of services that we can wrap around our product, be they digital or be they the way in which we go to market or other types of patient interaction. We need to identify that sort of a holistic view of what should be surrounding the drug to truly add value. And then my guess is that, first of all, the price pressure will be a little bit less heartfelt. And secondly, I think it will answer also some of the questions that society have to the pharma industry, in that, they want to see ultimately pharma companies measured on treatment outcome. And so I can't say sort of in a few words what those services could be, and they might actually differ from pharma company to pharma companies, but I think it's a way of basically wrapping your drug or your medicine in different services that create value add.
Okay, thank you. Well, that was a nice explanation. I'm going to read out a few audience ones that have come in because I quite like them. So Stephen Picardo, for example, future pharma companies will provide their patients with apps they can use to help them during the clinical trial. They'll provide near real-time access to the data from the ongoing trials. In a patient-accessible portal, these companies will also maintain a connection with their patients after studies end so that they can maintain contact and leverage them for future study design and, of course, future treatment. So a very clinical angle there. Cheryl Peterson says, easy-to-use digital solutions for patients, including integrated digital monitoring and reporting devices that deliver 360 big data back to physicians, care teams, and pharma on an ongoing basis. Engagement incentives provided by pharma and health insurance companies to keep patients engaged in their own well-being and on the track to wellness. A knowledgeable consumer base that understands, values, and leverages the patient-pharma relationship. Boon Hyun Tan says, I believe that life science companies of the future will split into R&D-focused product providers and then customer solution providers based on disease platforms or channels. So that was probably echoing the comments that I made earlier, both having to be patient-centric, however, to achieve their respective objectives. So a few more in. I've also got a couple more that I will read out later that I quite like as well. I'll just read out one more. Kasia Hein-Peters. Hi, Kasia, good to see you. It will be organized by patient types and not by internal functions. Pharma companies will be able to provide solutions integrated in the patient journey and the healthcare organization. So getting some nice responses there. Keep them coming. You can see I've put the question back up on the screen. And I'm going to ask one more poll question. We've only got just over 10 minutes left. One more question, and then we will go back to our panelists for some answers. So let's have a look at our screens now. Do patients currently expect a digital element to their engagement with the professionals? So notice there's no pharma angle to this question at the moment. So I'm very interested to hear what you feel, perhaps as patients yourselves or with your experience with wide numbers of patients, about their expectations. So looking at it from, as somebody said earlier, putting ourselves in their shoes, I think it was Davidek who was trying to reinforce that sentiment. So let's hold that open for a few seconds. Half of people voted so far, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you, everybody. Let's have a look. So only 10% should always expect the offer, but 42% sometimes occasionally, and then tailing off. Well, actually, a good third people say rarely. So that's the current situation in terms of expectation. So, Davidek, how do you feel about all of the things that we've expressed since you last spoke? Quite a few of them, I'm afraid, but really interested to hear your comments.
Yeah. No, I think it's very interesting. If you look at some of the trends, and specifically in North America, around telemedicine in general, right? Just really how patients are trying to even connect with their healthcare providers. And a lot of them are preferring, 1 out of 5 are preferring that telemedicine path, right? And also, if you incorporate electronic health record systems, and now I know a lot of companies, whether it be the EHR providers or even some of the IDN ACOs, are really focusing on these patient profiles, right? And really trying to get these patient records kind of compatible, where as a consumer and a patient myself, I should be able to know I should have all my doctor's information, whether I see one doctor or multiple doctors, within one spot. So that interoperability really is a big key. So I think based on kind of what we're seeing now in the industry, and remember, outside of pharma, how are people contacting us, right? So I think it's, as you know, that the terminology is called liquid expectations. I believe because of outside factors on how we communicate with the world, now that once we come into medicine, I think we're also having those same kind of expectations. So I guess to answer your question, I do think they expect some kind of element of digital engagement with their healthcare providers or with their healthcare in general. But that's kind of based on my assumptions and what I've seen in the past, based on a lot of shifts that are going on, at least within e-prescribing in electronic health systems.
Okay, and Lisa, I'm interested in whether or not you've agreed with everything that Davidek just said, or if you have a differing point of view.
I think that patients do currently expect some digital engagement with their HCP. This is probably country dependent and often area of the country dependent. I mean, in the U.S., it's increasingly the case that people are used to having a digital element in terms of electronic health records with their HCP. But I do think it varies with types of patients and with settings. It's not consistently done, and certainly it's not consistently done in all geographies.
Okay, John?
Yeah, and I go back to the, patients are people, and they are expecting more of us, and a lot of that has to do with how they're able to interact digitally with their other things that they do in their life. And so I think the expectations are there. And if I were to go back to what does patient-centric mean also, I just wanted to add a comment there in that different parts of the organization think differently around patient centricity. And, our scientists may think of it more in terms of, am I doing something that will deliver a science component that will help the patient, and that could be considered patient-centric. But as the field narrows and we become more focused on diagnostics and a smaller patient population with more specificity in the medicine, I think it's going to be incumbent on us to understand, not just from the scientific and cell pathway, what the solution is, but also what the service is that we can put beside it. So I think as we know more about these patients, we have a bigger opportunity to provide the right digital elements of the engagement with an HCP.
Okay. There's a question here that I really want to make sure that we cover before finishing the session, and it absolutely aligns to the goals that I stated at the beginning. Lars, I'll come to you first on this. What role do patients play in the service design and delivery? We've already spoken a fair bit about co-creation, but I'm interested in how we do that best. So let's just assume that everybody does agree now that co-creation is the way forward. But tell us about how best we can involve them, and tell us how, from a technological angle, we can get patients better involved.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. It's not the easiest question to answer, to be quite frank. I think
I didn't say it was going to be easy.
Even pure-bred sort of technology companies where there's no sort of ethical or regulatory challenges intertwined with, they struggle with it. But I think most of the pharma companies do actually do a lot of great patient programs where technology elements could become a part of it. So I would just expose as much of the technological development in pharma companies to the patients as possible to get their feedback fast. And that could easily happen through existing patient programs. And I believe that we're at a point in time where there's not a single engagement in life that doesn't have a digital element, or almost not. So the patients are more ready for open discussions around this. So it's the more the merrier is really sort of the short answer. Very simple answer.
More the merrier. That's I think people will remember that. How about our other panelists? I want to make sure you get a chance to answer that question as well. What role do patients play in service design and delivery, and how do we produce great co-creation as opposed to something mediocre? So, John, you were mentioning co-creation earlier. Let's come back to you.
Yeah, and so, we have partnered and recently actually built our own capability in terms of that patient-centered design. In the journey, I think, and we're still on it, it's an interesting question to examine how we're spending our marketing research, for example. What are we focused in when it comes to marketing research? And my own opinion within my company is that we're still too focused on the selling aspects and marketing aspects as opposed to what we could do to be better serving patients. And I would love to see a shift to more in the patient research, primary patient research, that greater understanding of the populations with which we are aspiring to serve, we have a deeper understanding. And I think that is going to be the differentiation point as we go forward. Like, how clearly do we understand their problems? And it's that clarity that will provide the right service. So it's about putting them at the center. It's about thinking about serving rather than selling. And I think that we will draw more and more patients into how we go about our business, the business part of our enterprise.
Okay. A couple of also answers from our audience. Rude Clark says, use the theory U approach to look at co-initiation, co-creation, prototyping, etc., where there's no hierarchy. Everyone listens to each other and no hidden agendas, so maybe look that up if you're interested. Heather Sharrock says, tap into the expertise in the general population, so very much a wisdom of crowds approach there. And I'm just getting a few more comments in as I'm speaking about, obviously remembering about caregivers and widening it beyond the patient net, of course. And a few people commenting actually on the drug as a service comments you made earlier, Lars. Let me, though, go to Lisa next. Lisa, good co-creation. How do we make it work? In Sanofi, of course, I think you're quite advanced in this area, and I'd love to know what advice you could give us here.
I think the primary thing about good co-creation is really to start more with a blank slate. It's not co-creation if you already have a pretty well-formulated product strategy or protocol or service, and then you bring it to somebody to just kind of test the features. It's co-creation if you really start with a problem statement, a joint problem statement, and say, how do we help accomplish this goal? What issues are you facing in managing your life and your disease, and how can we help you? What are the kinds of product features? And something I'm pushing back on is that there's a separation in patient focus between product and R&D and service. Good R&D products serve an unmet need. So the input from patients in terms of what they really need and what's really important, I think is really critical and can be really well done in certain instances in developing target product profiles. But I think the key to good co-creation is a process where there is joint partnership of the patients involved as well as the company colleagues. There's an openness to truly create most of the features of the identified target problem. And then kind of an iterative process of, this is a concept, we tested it, this is a concept, we refine it. That's what we've done when things have been effective in some of both our software solutions and our communication tools.
Well, I've got an audience member saying, I fully agree, but now we just need the guts to actually do it. So that's a nice message for us. We're nearly out of time, so Davida, have you got a final comment to make there before we end?
Yeah, so I'll keep it real brief, and I agree with both Lisa, John, and Lars there. And I think to echo that, I would focus on the learnings, right? And that's something I think we can do better at pharma is almost admitting failure, but pivoting from that fast and learn from it and don't do it again. So that was my big thing. I mean, it's all in execution now. I think we know what we need to do. I think we just need to do it, execute, and when we do fail, which is going to happen, admit it, learn from it, and move on. I think that's really the key, because I think we sometimes try to overcomplicate things, and just it's all in execution. It's all in execution.
Well, a very humble final comment there from you, Davida, which I appreciate. And I hope you've enjoyed today's session generally. Obviously, a huge thank you to the people that you can see in front of you right now. As I said to you at the beginning, one of the key people involved in putting this together was Ignicio. So do please say so. As you leave, there'll be a little exit poll. Do please say if you are in a position to wanting some assistance when it comes to the topics that we've been talking about today, as Ignicio is poised and ready to be able to help you. And, of course, if you're coming to Barcelona, you'll be able to meet Lars and his team face-to-face, as well as other panelists today. And then, of course, for those of you in the U.S., we have our event in Philadelphia. Both of these events, by the way, proving far more popular than they have been in the past. Well over 1,000 attendees coming to Barcelona, for example. So they're going to be really, really great events. And as you're leaving, we'd just love to know what you thought of today and whether you've got any future ideas as we go forward, because our only interest, as you know, is to be of use and to drive our industry forward, get to where we need to be, which is obviously, as evidenced by the results of this webinar, a lot more digital savvy according to our customers' positions and our customer needs, and, of course, patient-focused as we do it. Massive thanks to everybody once again. Hope to see you all soon, and look forward to your answers as you leave the webinar once again. So thank you, everyone. Bye.